All right.
Are we ready? Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Michael Menton. I'm a political science professor at the University of Minnesota and also a board member of FairVote Minnesota. And I'm thrilled that you could join us on this Sunday afternoon for our North and West Metro Democracy Town Hall, the fourth of five democracy town halls across Minnesota between now and the end of March. We want to send our, first of all, we want to send our condolences to the family of the victims of the shootings in Atlanta. We stand with our friends in the Asian American and Pacific Islander community in Georgia, here in Minnesota, and across the country. And we will stand with the Asian and Pacific Islander community, and we will push for reforms that will combat disinformation and hate and build an inclusive and representative democracy that Americans deserve. In most of my research and teaching, I focus on representation of people of color and try to understand well the barriers and the inequities in our systems that hinders us from having a full and equal representation. For this reason, I'm excited to introduce today's conversation about how we can contribute and build a democracy that is representative and responsive to all of us. We are truly at a crossroads in the evolution of our democracy. Are we going to proceed down the path of misinformation, inequitable representation, autocracy, hopefully not that, and political violence, or are we going to make the changes necessary to build a more resilient, representative, and inclusive democracy? The fact that many of you are willing to join us on a Sunday afternoon gives me a lot of hope. We must all join together and commit to this crucial moment to work for the reforms to strengthen our democracy. For more than 2 decades, FairVote Minnesota has led the movement to empower Minnesota voters with more choice and more power in our elections through more equitable voting systems. We believe that ranked choice voting is key to achieving this goal. And toward that end, we've trained and mobilized thousands of volunteers, educated hundreds and thousands of voters, and secured breakthrough wins for ranked choice voting in Minneapolis, St. Paul, St. Louis Park, and most recently in Bloomington and Minnetonka. We are among the dozens of cities and states using ranked choice voting, including the states of Maine, Alaska, and New York City starting this year. Even before the events of January 6th, we're seeing growing momentum for ranked choice voting and other reforms here in Minnesota and across the country. But now there is no time to wait. We must accelerate these reforms. That is the conversation we're going to have this evening. HF 89 and SF 218, chief authored by Representative Steve Elkins and Senator Ken Aiken, will take ranked choice voting statewide and give cities, school boards, and county commissions the choice to adopt ranked choice voting if they wish. The bills are so popular that they have clone bills in both chambers. In the House, a total of 39 authors and some who are with us tonight. HF 9, introduced by Representative Greenman, eliminates barriers to voting and includes campaign finance reform to address the role of money in politics. Speaking of pro-democracy legislators, we have an amazing lineup of pro-voter champions with us tonight. So in addition to our special guests, Secretary of State Steve Simon and Congressman Dean Phillips, we have state legislators, Senator Steve Swedzinski, Senator Melissa Franzen, Senator John Hoffman, Senator Chris Eden, Senator Mary Kanish, Senator Ann Johnson Stewart, and Senator Melissa Wicklund, and Representatives Kristen Barner, Representative Andrew Carlson, Representative Heather Ellison, Representative Steve Elkins, Representative Cedric Frazier, Representative Kelly Morrison, Representative Mike Nelson, and Representative Lori Pryor. We also have some local elected officials. Thank you all for being here and being such a strong democracy champions. Our state and our nation needs your leadership now more than ever. Now it's my pleasure to hand over the mic to Clean Elections Minnesota leader, George Beck. He's been championing the fight against big money in politics, and he's helped bring ranked choice voting to his home city, St. Louis Park. Please help me in welcoming George Beck.
Thank you, Michael. My name is George Beck. I chair Clean Elections of Minnesota, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit that is devoted to democracy reform in our state. We are very happy to be able to co-sponsor the program this morning. Briefly, the issues we are following this session and testifying about include House File 9 that Michael just mentioned, Representative Greenman's bill. It includes several important issues like public financing, dark money contributions, released felons voting, automatic voter registration, and the mailing of absentee ballots to all voters. This bill has passed through several House committees and should arrive on the House floor. We testified against the voter suppression in Senate File 173. It contains voter ID and provisional balloting. This bill has been sent to the Senate floor from the Finance Committee after a fiscal note dispute in which the majority decided to rely on their intuition rather than the numbers supplied to them in the fiscal notes. You may be aware this is a nationwide effort to narrow the electorate, and Minnesota is participating. Ranked choice voting was heard in the House Local Government Committee on March 17th, House File 89. It drew substantial support from around the state and even from Utah. The majority, we strongly support this bill as the fairest and most democratic way to elect our public officials. Its antithesis popped up, of course, Senate File 708, a prohibition on ranked choice voting, which we opposed. It was heard in the Senate State Government Committee and laid over. We still hope to see hearings on a national popular vote and redistricting reform. Now we want to salute Congressman Dean Phillips for his leadership in Congress on campaign finance reform. He also walks the walk and does not accept PAC money. He is a strong leader in our country for fair and democratic elections. Thank you.
Thank you, George. So I want to give a brief overview of our agenda for this evening. So first, Secretary of State Steve Simon will share his thoughts on the importance of democracy reform and his work in protecting and defending democracy. And we'll hear from U.S. Representative from the 3rd Congressional District, Congressman Dean Phillips. And he will also hear from our state senators and representatives on reform efforts at the state legislature. Then we'll have some time for question and answer with all of you. So please submit your questions to Aaron Zamoff. And note that we will also, because of the wealth of democracy champions in the state legislature, we won't be able to direct every question to all of you, so to all the legislators. So now I will hand the mic off to FairVote Minnesota's Director of Public Affairs, Aaron Zamoff, to introduce our special guest. Aaron.
Thanks, Michael. We are thrilled to have 2 special guests with us this afternoon, 2 of really the biggest champions on the front lines protecting our democracy, Secretary of State Steve Simon and Congressman Dean Phillips. First, we will hear from Secretary Simon. He has been very busy this last year, ensuring a safe, accessible, and secure election in 2020, all in the midst of a pandemic. And then he has been at the forefront fighting the disinformation campaign about that election that threatened and frankly continues to threaten our democracy. As you all know, trust in our democratic institutions and procedures is the foundation of a resilient democracy. Secretary Simon understands this and has been traveling across the state and nation by Zoom to ensure voters have the facts about the 2020 election and the integrity of our election system. He started his career in elections as chair of the House Elections Committee, and among the measures he advocated at the legislature was a bill to allow local governments the freedom to adopt ranked choice voting. We are truly lucky to have a Secretary of State that understands the value of reform and is determined to protect the democratic process. There is no one better equipped to help lead our state elections at this moment when our democracy has been under attack. We are all grateful for your service and commitment to democracy, Secretary Simon, and for your time with us this afternoon. Please join me in welcoming Secretary of State Steve Simon.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much, Aaron. Thank you to Jean Massey. Thank you to FairVote Minnesota. Many of you heard me say this before, but it bears repeating. I like to say as Secretary of State that I'm in the democracy business. And when you're in the democracy business, it's great to have a business partner like FairVote Minnesota. For years, not just in this job, but in my last job in the Minnesota legislature, we have been arm in arm trying to expand and sometimes on the defensive protect our democracy in Minnesota. So it's an honor to be part of this series. This is my second such meeting, and I always learn something whenever I'm at a FairVote event, and I expect this to be no different. And it's great to be essentially the opening act for my friend Dean Phillips, who I first met when I was 9 years old and he was 10 years old. That's a long story. We'll tell it to you sometime, but it's a pleasure to be here. So I've been asked to just spend a few minutes, and I'm mindful of the time constraints here today, to talk a little bit about the 2020 election because it bears on our future and the path ahead. And I want to say a minute or two about that. I don't need to tell any of you that 2020 was a year like no other. It affected our health, it affected our jobs, but it also affected our democracy. A little over a year ago, we had our presidential nominating primary. Remember that? Super Tuesday? It seems like a few lifetimes ago at this point. And only 2 weeks after we had that event is really when we felt the full force and effect of COVID-19, the shutdowns, the lockdowns, and the considerable anxiety. And from the standpoint of our office, trying to coordinate a large statewide election, it looked like a really daunting task. We saw what happened in states in late March and early April that held their presidential nominating contests at that time. States like Wisconsin, states like Georgia, you may recall the really scary scenes of long, unconscionably long lines of voters that were shut out, that were turned away, a total collapse of the election judge system by which we keep some sort of order at the polling place. And frankly, we were worried in this state. Another thing that worried us at the time was a simple math problem. And I bet you didn't expect math this close to dinner, but there's a little bit of math, an easy math problem that crystallizes, I think, our thinking about a year ago today. We have about 3,000 polling places in Minnesota, and we were expecting about 3 million voters in Minnesota. That math works out quite nicely to 1,000 to 1. That's 1,000 people per polling place. And we knew from a public health standpoint, if nothing else, we needed to get that number down. We're talking about 1,000 people and their droplets circulating in relatively closed quarters during a 13-hour period, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. I don't know about all of you. I'm coming to you live from Hopkins. I vote about 4 blocks away in the basement of a church. Low ceiling, not a lot of room to grow, and a sort of a confined space. So one of the things that we were able to do, and this is where FairVote and so many of you come in, is we were able to take advantage of a law on the books in Minnesota, of which there are many good laws in Minnesota on the books pertaining to elections, to mitigate the situation. And that is so-called no excuses absentee voting, the right to vote from home or vote at a government office without providing an excuse or an explanation of any kind. I have some pride and ownership because that was my bill during my last term in the legislature. And so we pushed that hard, you may have noticed, for several months. Not to say that voting in a traditional way in a polling place is a bad thing or an inferior way of voting, but we knew that a lot of people would want to vote this way. And FairVote and its members and its leadership were behind that effort as well, as were many other partners throughout the state. And so we knew we were onto something in mid-May, just to put things in perspective. Every 2 years in mid-May during an election year, we open up the web portal for the first time so that people who want that option can pursue that option. to go to a website and order the ballot to come to them at home. In 2016, the last presidential election, out of 5.6 million Minnesotans, you know how many people in the first week that portal was open elected to choose to have their ballots come to them at home? 88 people, 88. 2 years later in 2018, the year that Dean Phillips was elected, in 2018, that number ballooned to 200 people. It just barely, a little over double, 200 people out of 5.6 million. Last year, you know how many in the first week chose that option? Almost 37,000 people. That's when I knew we were onto something. And I remember asking a national expert at the time, what do you think we can expect? You've been all around the country, you're well respected on both sides of the aisle. What's an expectation here? He said, I think if Minnesota could get to 50%, that would be a grand slam home run. He used the baseball analogy, grand slam home run. I'm here to tell you on November 3rd, we got to 58%. 58% of Minnesotans decided to vote from home or otherwise vote absentee. That means only 42% voted in the traditional way, meaning they went to a given place at a given time on a given day. And there's nothing wrong with that. I hope to get back to that. I love taking my 8-year-old daughter to vote. I love greeting the election judges. But the point was, this time, my wife and I thought it was important to lead by example and not do that. And on the way, we got to #1 in the country in voter turnout for the 3rd election in a row. We got there in 2016, we repeated in 2018, and this time was the sweetest of all because we did it in the middle of a once-in-a-century pandemic. All elections are tough, they're intense, there are a lot of moving parts, but this time we had the added complication of a once-in-a-century pandemic. And that victory belongs to so many people, including many of you, legislators and FairVote members and activists and others. We leaned in. We did not turn away, even though times were tough. We leaned in, Minnesotans leaned in, and I think that's just what we do. So while it's great that we got to nearly 80%, 79.96%, if you must know, in terms of voter turnout, we know we have work to do, a lot of work to do, because not every community, either demographic or geographic, votes at those sky-high levels. So we know we have work to do. Some of that is work at the legislature. Some of that is work that is quite removed from the legislature. But here's what I want to say about the road ahead. House File 9 is an outstanding compilation of reforms that we should pursue. You heard some of what's in it. Things like automatic voter registration, pre-registration for high school students, restoring the vote for those who have left prison behind. We should also pursue many more options for ranked choice voting. You heard about the 5 strong, large, diverse communities that have already adopted it. I'd like to see, and I know you would like to see, many more have the ability to adopt it. But many jurisdictions are hamstrung right now. They have to go to the legislature on bended knee asking for permission in order for them to even try it. That's wrong. I used to carry that legislation when I was in the House, and I know others are carrying it now. And we have to get that across the finish line. But one of the central challenges that I'm seeing, and that was alluded to in earlier remarks, is this tidal wave of disinformation that we're seeing about the 2020 election. Never mind January 6th and the horrible, shameful storming of the US Capitol. Congressman Phillips obviously was there and can say much more about that than I can. That was horrific. That is a stain on our country. But the fever did not break on January 6th. Nor did the fever break, I'm sad to say, on January 20th. The fever has not yet broken on this wave of disinformation, this dishonesty, this continual lying about what happened or what didn't happen. So let me set the record straight. And I think this is the foundational thing for all of us as we address and as we rebut these false claims. Let's talk about what the truth is. The truth is very simple. In 2020, nationwide, and particularly in Minnesota, the election was fair, accurate, honest, and secure, period. That is the truth. And don't just take my word for it. Look what former Attorney General William Barr said. Look what the FBI Director, Christopher Wray, said just 2 weeks ago under oath at a Senate committee. Look at what the 60+ judges, some of them Trump-appointed judges, said in the many lawsuits filed all over this country. The fact is we had an election with integrity and our democracy held. But it's going to be our obligation, all of us on this call and the people we know, to forge ahead and push back on those lies and that disinformation, because out of those lies and that disinformation are coming new, really malevolent, really toxic legislative proposals right here in Minnesota that would make voting harder, that would shut people out of the system. Some of them are oldies and not goodies, like voter ID, which Minnesotans emphatically rejected by a statewide vote in 2012. And that's back on the strength of these lies and that disinformation. So we can't let it stand. We have to rebut it. And at a minimum, that means telling the truth about what the election is. So I'll leave it at that. That's a big task for all of us. I look forward to the other analysis and comments by everyone else on this call. It's my honor to be Secretary of State and be in the democracy business, and thanks for being a great partner.
Thank you, Secretary Simon. We are grateful for your commitment to democracy and excited to partner with you on the work ahead. Now, I would like to introduce Congressman Dean Phillips, one of Minnesota's foremost advocates of ranked choice voting and democracy reform. Representative Phillips, a member of the Ethics Committee and the Democracy Reform Task Force, has been leading on campaign finance, electoral, and ethics reforms in Congress. As vice chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus, he's working on reforms to make it easier to bring people together to reach bipartisan, effective solutions to the problem we face. And that's really what we all need. Representative Phillips is co-sponsor and an active contributor of H.R. 1, the For the People Act, which just passed the House earlier this month, a landmark anti-corruption, voter protection, and campaign finance reform bill. He also sponsored the Voter Choice Act, which would provide financial resources and technical guidance to cities and states that want to implement ranked choice voting. Please join me in welcoming this true champion of democracy, Congressman Dean Phillips.
Thanks, Aaron. Oh, I'll give you all the time you want to applaud.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, my friend, we don't get a lot of those. So it's kind of, it's nice once in a while. Aaron, thank you so much. And to FairVote Minnesota and Clean Elections Minnesota, thank you for the terribly important and tireless work that you do on behalf of all of us, Minnesotans and Americans. To my fellow electeds, greetings to everybody. I love how Secretary of State Simon referenced when we were 10 and 11 years old. I'm going to throw Kelly Morrison into this as well, Representative Morrison, because I was great friends with Kelly at that age as well. And when other kids were playing baseball or football or swimming or watching cartoons, Kelly and Steve and I were talking about becoming politicians. So anything is possible, my friends. And if you knew me at that age, you'd still be wondering what the heck I'm doing here. But nonetheless, thank you. And, as Steve mentioned, January 6th, it changed everything. It changed me. I'm sure those of you who watched on television, I can only imagine the horror of seeing something transpire on our TV screens at our US Capitol, and to be in that room with the seditionists who created the problem, to be subject to it, changed us. And we have not recovered here in the Capitol complex and amongst my colleagues. And we all recognize, I shouldn't say we all, most of us recognize the fragility of democracy. And I've been a proponent of H.R. 1, of ranked choice voting, of clean elections for my career, but never has it been as existential, I would argue, as it is right now. And of my many blessings and so many reasons to be grateful, I have to tell you, to have Secretary of State Simon leading that effort in Minnesota is an extraordinary blessing to all of us. Literally one of the finest around the country at a time where we need, as you well know, principled secretaries of state like Steve Simon. So thank you, my friend. I can't tell you how grateful we are. So where do we go from here? As I assess January 6th, as I recognize that literally amongst the people with whom I serve, there are those that still wish to undermine our elections, that wish to impose their will on us, and they wish to do so in the most reprehensible, disgusting, and horrifying ways imaginable. And by the way, before I continue, I want to recognize Bob and Polly McCrae and Kate Studebaker, who are like second, third, and fourth parents to me. So I want to say hello to you as well, and thank you for being on this call. So where do we go from here? We have now 250 measures around the country trying to make voting harder. And the only reason they're trying to do it is because they didn't like the outcome of the last election. And the great irony of this entire circumstance is a big lie generated January 6th. And the truth is creating the backlash to make voting more difficult for way too many Americans. If there was anything that we should unify behind, organize around, and amplify and advocate for, it is improving our elections. It is making voting easier, and it is ensuring that no American is disenfranchised, not one. And that's what HR 1 was all about. It was important last year. We talked about it. I've been on Zooms like this with all of you promoting it. But now it's entirely different. Never would I've imagined that its components would be the antidote to everything from which we're suffering right now. If you haven't, first of all, very few in Congress read the bills themselves, but if you haven't read the bill, at least read a summary, because it is so comprehensive, so terribly important, so well conceived, and so aligned with the interests of everybody on this Zoom and every American, that I think it's one of the most important initiatives, perhaps of our lifetimes. And we will, I think, look back on this. Should we pass it through the Senate and be signed into law, we will look at this as one of the most important pieces of legislation in modern American history. And I think January 6th is a good reason why. But just to summarize it, for those of you who haven't, there are three kind of core components, starting with voting rights. It mandates national automatic voter registration, which is in America, the fact that we don't have automatic voter registration is beyond me. Why do we put people in a position where you can walk into a gun store in Atlanta, Georgia, buy a gun the same day you wish to, but if you wanted to go vote the same day you wish to, you cannot? Think about that for a minute. We're going to rectify that with HR 1 and ensure that every American voter is registered and end this nonsense about putting people through hoops and hurdles to do so. It makes sure that online options are available for voter registration and being able to correct or cancel or change your address instead of having to go down to some government department to do so physically. It mandates early voting for Americans all across the country. And while I absolutely support and endorse states managing our elections, it's really important actually that states do so independently. I think having some baselines and benchmarks for how we do things are really important. Early voting was wonderfully adopted, as you well know. I did it, I'm sure many of you did it. It would allow that to be more consistent around the country. Gerrymandering. I've told you all before that if we're going to fix Congress, it's going to start with having fewer deep blue and deep red districts. We need more purple districts. We need more districts that are competitive, because you behave differently when you have to represent more than your base voters. And I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. I'm lucky to represent a purple district. I like to listen to voices of dissent and difference. And we're only going to fix that if we go to independent commissions, which HR 1 mandates. We have a redistricting coming up, of course, in Minnesota. It's probably going to be another mess, probably going to be thrown back to the courts. We should do this in a much more effective, efficient manner, and that means independent redistricting. It prohibits voter rolls from being purged, as we're seeing all around the country, and it restores voting rights to people convicted of felonies who have served their time, and does all the things, the basic things, to make voting a little bit more easy, not more difficult. It also attacks campaign finance, which you know is one of my foremost priorities. It reinstalls a public financing system like we used to have for our presidential campaigns, of course, until Barack Obama in 2008 chose not to use it. But the notion of allowing small dollar donors to compete with the big money in our country is a great notion. And we wouldn't pay for it with tax dollars. We'd pay for it with penalties imposed on companies that break the law. And it's a 6-to-1 match up to, I think, a couple $100s. So if you give $100, your actual contribution to the candidate of your choice would be $600, which allows you to compete with the $5,600 big donors that have the ears, the eyes, and the heads of Congress right now. It supports a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, which I think we have to do, and I know you all agree. Passes the Disclose Act, which would shine a bright light on where the money is coming from. The Honest Ads Act, of course, from Senator Klobuchar and Mark Warner, relative to social media and making sure we know who is taking out the ads that we see so often, discloses political spending in a broad swath. It reconstitutes the Federal Election Commission, right, which right now is toothless and meaningless. We really have no oversight right now. If you are following this, there's almost no oversight because the commission doesn't operate. This would allow it to do so again, and prohibits coordination between PACs and campaigns. Ethics. I serve on the Ethics Committee in the House. You would be astounded by the transgressions of members of the House, usually and most regularly as it relates to campaign finance, misuse of funds, inappropriate fundraising techniques, inappropriate coordination. HR 1 would address a lot of this. It would require our presidents to actually disclose their tax returns. What a novel idea, of course. Would stop members of Congress from using taxpayer money to settle sexual harassment and discrimination cases, which they have been using taxpayer money to do, if you can imagine that. It re-empowers the Office of Congressional Ethics and also imposes a new code of ethics for Supreme Court justices. And there's a lot more. The point is it's comprehensive. I don't want to read it all to you, but I really do encourage you to take a look. And then that brings me to ranked choice voting. As Jean knows well, I started out skeptical. I became kind of a passive supporter, and now I'm evangelical. I do not think there is a better way to fix what is so broken in our country than ranked choice voting for so many reasons. And the most important is it actually encourages candidates who are more broad in their approach, more invitational in their spirit, and more modest and moderate in their approach to politics. And I think that's what the country needs more than anything else. We have a political industrial complex of two parties that makes it awfully difficult right now to succeed in this environment. Ranked choice voting works, as we've seen. That's why I invite all of you to be evangelical too, because we need it. We are now seeing it be considered in states that you would never imagine it possible. Just in the last couple months, in fact, some states are looking at it that I never would have thought so. And of course, state of Maine has sent Jared Golden to Congress now for 2 terms using a ranked choice system. I authored the Voter Notice Act, which is a bill in Congress to ensure there are resources shared with states to support ranked choice voting should voters wish to adopt it, which I hope happens in Minnesota. So ranked choice isn't part of HR 1, but it's something that is happening on its own. If success breeds success, and I think it will, it is only a matter of time, not a matter of if, only when we start moving to it. If you advocate for one thing and want to leave a legacy for our country, I do believe ranked choice voting perhaps could be that one thing to fundamentally change and fix the problems that we have, which is the lack of decency between Americans. So with that in mind, I want to say thank you. I tell you to keep the faith because it's been a darn tough year for everybody. But we needed a wake-up call. We got one in 2016, as you well know. We got one on January 6th. We will not be judged by those dates. We will be judged by how we handle what happened on those dates. And I have great faith in all of us. I'm grateful to be among all of you and to represent some of you, and cannot wait to advocate together. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Erin, and look forward to questions.
Great. Thank you, Congressman Phillips. We are grateful for your leadership on democracy reform and especially being evangelical on ranked choice voting at a time when we really need it most. We are fortunate to have so many democracy reform advocates here tonight. Before I turn it over to the state legislators, and I'm going to give them an opportunity to speak to ranked choice voting and other democracy reform efforts at the state legislature, I do want to recognize some of our local elected officials. We have Bloomington Mayor Tim Bussey, who where they are going to be implementing ranked choice voting this year. So that is very exciting. I think I see Plymouth School Board member Cheryl Polson, former Senator Steve Kelly, candidate for the Senate, Bonnie Westland, who's a big supporter of ranked choice voting, and also candidate for the House, Caitlin Cahill. Thank you all. And any elected official, please just raise your hand. And you're really at the forefront of local democracy, and we so appreciate you joining this important discussion. So what I'd like to do now is call on our state elected officials and to just, if you could please keep it to a minute so we have time for question and answer, that would be great. I'm going to start with my Senator Melissa Franzen.
Thank you everybody for having us. And this is what I normally look like on a weekend of a bike ride with the kiddos. So rushed here, but I'm glad I'm here. This is a conversation that doesn't get old. And just like Representative Phillips mentioned, you start talking about this issue, you think it's a good idea, but my gosh, is it the idea that needs to be pushed forward by all of us now more than ever. I just wanted to say thank you for the work that you've been doing for so many years, and we're here for you. Just to give you a little glimpse of the Minnesota Senate, which I've been honored to serve for the last 8 years, it's not getting easier. In fact, right after the insurrection of January 6th, I put forward a resolution to condemn the violence. You would think that would be a bipartisan, non-political statement that the Senate would pass unanimously. It still has not passed. The House has in the Minnesota House, but not the Senate. So that gives you an idea how critical democracy, how fragile our system is still to this date, that we can't even agree that violence at the United States Capitol should be condemned at any level. So, and I'm also a very proud sponsor of Senate File 218, which is the ranked choice voting bill with Senator Eakin at the helm. So I just want to say thank you. Anything you need from me, Jean, you've done a magnificent job over the years, and we're just, the believers are getting bigger and bigger and larger. So we love that. I love that I see so many constituents and friends, and certainly Mayor Bussey will mention some interesting actual commentary that he might ask or share with us about what's really happening on the ground with ranked choice voting after the acceptance and the victory of having ranked choice voting in Bloomington and Minnetonka. So thank you for having us, and share this love with other constituents and people all over the state.
Thank you, Senator Franzen, so much. And now I'm going to turn it over to Senator Zwozinski.
Hi, everybody. I am so proud to be part of all these reforms that are everybody's discussing tonight. And the impetus for me was, if you know your American history, in 1776 we wrote the Declaration of Independence, and in that are found 27 grievances why we're about to embark on this war. And I think it was the 16th grievance of the 27 that says, for imposing taxes on us without our consent. For imposing taxes on us without our consent. And if you think of a lot of the reforms that Representative Phillips has been talking about, and a lot of the reforms you're going to hear from the legislators this evening and in the past and in the future, a lot of the reforms are based around for imposing taxes on us without our consent. And if you are taxed, property tax, sales tax, income tax, gas tax, and you don't have the right to vote, that's an injustice that what goes back to 1776. So things like when felons get out of prison and they're paying property taxes and sales taxes and gas taxes, they should have that right to vote. And I would even extend it to something we don't hear a lot about, but 16 and 17-year-olds who are paying income taxes and sales taxes and gas taxes, and they don't have a say in how that money's spent. So anyways, thank everybody for being here today, and let's move on forward.
Great. Thank you, Senator. And do we have Senator Chris Eaton here?
I'm here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for joining us.
It's an honor to be here. I am so thrilled with everything I've heard. I'm still a little traumatized over the 6th of January. And it was even worse as I had relatives texting me about how they were supporting the insurrectionists. I was just appalled, and still am to this day. I never felt our democracy was as fragile as I did that day. It was always, growing up, it was always a matter of competing between the parties, who was more patriotic and who was protecting the democracy more, the Democrats or the Republicans. And to have one of the parties actually supporting that was appalling. So I am very happy to be part of this and to do what I can to make sure that our democracy stays strong and everyone has the right to vote.
Thank you so much, Senator Eaton. And now I'd like to call on Senator Mary Kanish, who is the chief author on one of our clone bills in the Senate. Senator Kanish.
Good afternoon, good early evening. I'm Senator Kunish,
Oh, I'm
And
so
very-
sorry.
That's not a problem. I get this all the time. New to the Senate this year, the Minnesota Senate, after 4 years in the House, and very proud to carry any kind of legislation that is going to help us not only give better access to voting, but expand the rights of voting, and to ensure that we are expanding the ability to vote and the interest of voting as well. There are a lot of people that would like to get into elections and be a good policy maker and just don't feel like they have a chance in it. So I really am so proud to carry this kind of legislation. So happy to be here with all of you. And our Secretary of State mentioned redistricting. I'm on the redistricting committee as well. And so we're very busy getting our principals together and planning for conversations within the community. And I'm sure that, this sort of ranked choice voting will be part of the conversation, and you can surely count on me to talk about it and champion it and cheerlead it, and hopefully that's how it's going to happen. We saw it happen in our endorsement practice here in our District 41. It was so slick, it was perfect, and so I saw it in action, and I'm ready to put it into action. So thank you all for being here today.
Thank you so much, Senator. We appreciate your being a champion of ranked choice voting. And now I'd like to hear from Senator Wickland.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Erin. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today and hear from the state level, what's going on, and also hear from the national level. There's so many important actions that are taking place. So I am Melissa Wickland. I'm in the Senate now in my third term, and I represent Bloomington and Richfield. And I'm excited to be a co-author on one of the clone bills that Senator Porter is carrying. And just excited also to be watching Bloomington as it moves forward with the implementation of ranked choice voting now for the municipal elections this fall. So it's been great to see that happen last year, that Bloomington's chose to move to ranked choice voting, but it's something that all communities across the state should be able to take action on them as well. And it's been very disappointing to see that the bill has not gotten a hearing in the Senate, and also disappointing on the choices of bills that are getting hearings. So I think that all of you should continue to raise your voices and appreciate your being interested in doing so. And that's really important that legislators in the Senate continue to hear that this is an important priority, because I think what Minnesotans really want is a strong democracy, and they want to see elections fair and strong elections just like we had last year. So thank you again for the invitation and for having us today.
Thank you, Senator Wickland. And then can we hear from Senator John Hoffman, please?
Hi, good afternoon. It's Sunday. Chopin, when he wrote the Minute Waltz, everybody thought it was going to just be done in a minute. Well, guess what? You can't do the Minute Waltz in a minute. It takes 1.5 minutes to 2.5 minutes. And so I just want to say thank you. Dean, I love the ovation behind you. I thought I'd throw my Gretsch kit in behind you. So, if you want to do a little jam, we can. But, here we go. The Fidos are here too. I just wanted to say hi, a shout out to Coon Rapids. I absolutely was a skeptical person. Just to ask Jeannie about how many conversations she and I have had over the years. Even on our treks down to Iowa, she would remind me, come on, John, it's time, you got to do it. And I just kept saying, nah, Jeannie. Matter of fact, I believe that the state should define elections, right? I don't know where the paradigm happened, Jeannie. Maybe it was in Ankeny last year when you and I were trying to get Amy elected. But, when you look at that, it's about time you let the local elections decide how things are going to look. And it's so cool to see George Beck, former, he was on the campaign finance board. And back on the days when you're on the campaign finance board, George, Steve and I, Secretary Steve Simon was in the House, and we brought the the ERIC system, we also brought the 18-year-olds get a letter from. Remember that, Stephen? It was like this House File 9 is the natural progression on what should happen now. I'm sad to see that it took 421 bill drops before it got a Senate file number, Senate File 422. And I just question, you had 5 engrossments in the House. This is a great conversation that we should be engaging in on what's the strategy to get this thing across the finish line, right? And I know the brick wall is the chair of what we see in the Senate, but you know what, this is a good bill, Steve, and I think we should go forward with it. So thank you for letting me be here. Let's keep things going, and I'm not skeptical anymore, Jeannie.
Awesome. Thank you, Senator Hoffman, for that. And Senator Ann Johnson-Stewart, please weigh in.
Well, okay, I'll try to say something different. Thank you for having me. It's a treat to be here. Just hearing my representative, Dean Phillips, talk about what they're trying to do at the national level is restoring my faith in not only humanity, but democracy. And I'll be literally praying that that continues. I think there's so many things that are wrong with our voting system right now. And I'm grateful that we seem to have some passionate patriots who are willing to really work for things like automatic registration, et cetera. I'm new this year. The thing that has shocked me beyond compare is the polarization, even in Minnesota, the power that the committee chairs have. And I really think that ranked choice voting will bring us all towards the middle, make people appeal to everybody and not just their loud and vicious. Well, we're not vicious, we're Democrats, but the other side can sometimes be vicious, but they're very, very polarizing. The way that we have things set up right now, and it's frustrating. So I welcome all of your efforts. Jean, I've known you for my whole campaign, which is 1.5 years, but I really appreciate the work you're doing, and thanks to everybody.
Great, thank you so much. And we have Representative Steve Elkins, who's the chief author on our bill in the House. Representative Elkins?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, I have to correct something from the beginning. I took another peek at Representative Frazier's clone bill on Friday, and we're up to 41 authors in the House, not 39. So, and we had a very favorable hearing in the House local government committee on Wednesday, overwhelmingly positive. I think it's going to position us well to actually move the bill next year. We consolidated the elections committee, local government committee into the state government finance committee this year, which just left us with a completely overwhelming agenda there. And we're able to crack the list of bills that Chair Nelson was able to hear there this year. But the hearing in local government on Wednesday went so well that I'm confident we're going to be able to move the bill in the House next year.
Great. Thank you, Representative Elkins. And now can we hear from Representative Kelly Morrison?
Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with all of you to support ranked choice voting and democracy reform. One of the reasons I ran for office in the first place was because I was so concerned about the toxic state of political discourse, and I wanted to be a voice for positive, constructive problem solving. And I think many of us share that ethic, but our current system just is not set up to support that. Ranked choice voting is a great way to foster civility, consensus building, and coalitions. And I think the majority of Minnesotans and Americans prefer positive issue-based campaigns that produce elected leaders with more broad coalitions of support. That's why I'm a co-author of House File 89, which includes ranked choice voting and other democracy reforms. And I could not be more grateful to the work that FairVote Minnesota, and especially Jean Massey and Aaron do for the just critical work to help make our democracy function better for all of us.
Thank you so much, Representative Morrison. And we have Representative Lori Pryor.
All right, so my internet is a little bit unstable, so I'm trying to do it where
we all understand, Representative Pryor.
Thank you. So I do have to say, just what a great event that you have this afternoon. And I know that we all share, we are represented by Steve Simon as a statewide office. And then I think here in the third, we're all represented by Congressman Dean Phillips. And it's great for me to be able to hear from someone that does represent me and does it, and both of you just so great, the work that you do. And I am really grateful and so glad that I could be a part of this and to hear your comments today. So I am agreeing with everything that people have said before. And I will add this comment too, which is being from Minnetonka, I am really looking forward to November, where I get to use ranked choice voting to elect our Minnetonka City Council people. Now there's 2 at-large seats. And I think that's just going to be a great way to try out ranked choice voting, and that we can build on that. When we have that experience and we can see the value of that experience in our local elections, I think that's really going to be something that we can build on when we go into next session. And as Representative Elkins said, it may not be that the bill moves and we do a vote on it this year, but we can be in a really strong position in the House to be able to vote on it next year, especially with our other House File 9, the other democracy reforms. So I think it just means that we need to still be just as active this year and start building for next year, where we can really get some high visibility for these issues and be building on the experiences that we'll be having in Minnetonka and Bloomington in the fall. So thanks, and just keep up the good work and the enthusiasm.
Thank you, Representative Pryor. And we also have Representative Andrew Carlson here.
Hi, everybody. Thanks again for the invite. Sorry, I'm calling in from my phone because I'm away from my desk at the moment, but definitely was able to hear the conversation so far, and just grateful to be a part of this amazing group of individuals. I do serve on state government finance and elections. It's just amazing to me how divergent the 2 parties are in terms of what or how they define election reform. I do believe that ranked choice voting is one of those reforms that we can come together on in a bipartisan way to make a real difference. So I think the work now is trying to convince some of our Republican colleagues in terms of the betterment of this approach, in terms of how we conduct our elections, as a starting point then for other reforms as well. But I think ranked choice voting, it really is that kind of tip of the spear in terms of bringing about a lot of the things that we talked about today. So continuing the efforts along those lines are very much worthwhile. Also, us folks here in Bloomington have been well educated in terms of the benefits, having ranked choice voting been approved by referendum last year. So we all had a chance to ask our questions and get smarter on the issue. And we're all looking forward to seeing that roll out this fall. So keep up the good work, Mayor Bussey, and we'll all be paying close attention come election time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Representative Carlson, so much. And now I'd like to call on Representative Kristen Bonner.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm State Representative Kristen Bonner of Maple Grove and Osseo, and I had the pleasure of serving as the Vice Chair of the Elections Committee last cycle. I'm now on State Government Finance and Elections. And of course, thank you for letting me be here to talk about my favorite subject, the democratic process. Those who know me know I get a little bit geeked out and excited about it. And like Representative Phillips and Representative Morrison, who kind of alluded to this, I love being able to have those conversations with folks across my purple district. And in fact, I've been having a very engaging dialogue with someone in my community back and forth. And it's really exciting to see and be able to explain to him, to have that opportunity to share what's actually in a bill, what it really means. And to see that dawn of realization. And I have to be honest with you, I think I'm winning them over. But quite frankly, the reason I'm here today, and I'll just highlight really briefly 3 quick things for you. First, I am the chief author of 2 bills, which I carried last session and again this session, and those are in House File 9. The first is, of course, automatic voter registration. And quite frankly, it really isn't automatic for that matter. It goes through a rigorous set of checks and balances to make sure that we have clean, crisp voter rolls, that every eligible voter has the opportunity to vote. And when we hold ourselves up as being this beacon of democracy, can you imagine not wanting anything less than that? So it's a really tremendous bill. And then, of course, also transparency in elections. knowing who's influencing your vote. That is also in House File 9. And really, I think voters are clamoring for these kinds of transparency measures. So I'm really proud to be the author of both of those. And then last, of course, the sanctuary and the polling place bill. After the Supreme Court decision, making sure that we have polling places where people feel free to come and vote their conscience unencumbered, unintimidated. And I think those are such critical pieces of our process, and holding ourselves up as the pinnacle of democracy and having all of those pieces and those reforms. These are incredible times we're living in, and we have incredible opportunities. So I'm hoping that we can use all of those, all of House File 9, and of course the resolution in the US Congress, but of course ranked choice voting. It's just a great way for us to really think about how we talk about people across the spectrum and ideology, because at the end of the day, democracy isn't about red, it's not about blue, it's not about progressive or conservative. It's about making sure that every voice and every vote gets counted. So thank you again for having me here today with such a great, distinguished panel of folks.
Thank you, Representative Bonner. And we do have two more representatives to get to, but we also want some time for Q&A. So if it's okay with all of you, we are going to go over just 10 minutes of our time so we can have time for question and answer. Is Representative Heather Ellison still with us, my representative? Representative Ellison? Okay, now I'm going to turn to Representative Cedric Frazier, who is chief author on our clone bill in the House. Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you, FairVote. Glad to be here. I'll make this quick because I also want to get to questions. I'm from House District 45A, which is New Hope, Crystal, in the eastern part of Plymouth. Yeah, I think this is pretty straightforward. We still have tons of communities and individuals in this country that are still fighting to have their voices heard and to be represented at all levels of government. Representative Wazinski talked about the history part going back to 1776. As a country, we're still trying to live up to this representative democracy that we promised, and starting in that document and then in the Constitution that was written. So for me, I believe in ranked choice voting because I believe it will force politicians to have to hear all the voices of the constituents that they represent. Right now, we have politicians that can vote no against bills, against legislation that will absolutely benefit large majorities of their constituencies, but they vote no because a small base will make sure that they will stay in power. I think ranked choice voting will push back against that and require them to engage in those conversations, and we can truly get to a multiracial and very diverse coalition and representative democracy in this country. And that's why I support ranked choice voting.
Thank you so much, Representative Cedric Frazier, for ending on that very strong note. Not ending, sorry, we're going to transition into question and answer. And thank you all for your unwavering commitment to democracy that works for all Minnesotans. Before I take questions from the audience, I do see that Mayor Tim Bussey is on. Is he still with us? And could you just briefly speak to implementing ranked choice voting in Bloomington? Mayor Bussey, are you available?
I am still here. Yes, thank you so very much. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight and be with everybody. It actually gets my mind out. My bracket is in shambles, so I'm glad to be here and talking to everybody here tonight. As other speakers have said, we approved ranked choice voting in Bloomington last November, a citywide referendum. It was a spirited debate back and forth between both sides. It was a good conversation, a lot of information, a lot of questions, a lot of answers. I made it clear that I wanted the voters to decide. I didn't want this decided by the city council. I didn't want this decided by the charter commission. This went to the voters, and we had 85% voter turnout in Bloomington last November. We had enormous turnout, and ranked choice voting passed by a margin of less than 100 votes, but it did indeed pass. And so ranked choice voting will be used this November for our city elections. It won't be used for our school board or obviously state level elections, but it will be used for our mayor's elections and our city council elections. We've spent the last couple of council meetings talking about the nuts and bolts kind of things about ranked choice voting, how many candidates that a voter will be able to rank, how to deal with write-in candidates, how to deal with a variety of different things, the nuts and bolts that we really need to work through to be able to get to November. And we're making progress. We've done it for the last couple of meetings. We've got another meeting tomorrow night where we're going to talk about it again. And I just wanted to bring up that this whole back and forth, this discussion about this continues to be a very real discussion. And I'm looking at a Facebook post right now from a group in Bloomington called the Bloomington Patriots, which is a far right group, and they plan on protesting tomorrow night before our city council meeting. And my guess is they might try and visit us at the city council. We've got closed meetings right now, so my guess is they might try and visit us. Now you might be tempted to simply roll your eyes and say, well, another group just protesting and this kind of thing. This was the group that last October showed up in front of my house with flags and bullhorns and automatic weapons to yell at me a little bit. And this is the group led by a woman who organizes the weekly armed protests in front of the governor's mansion. And so this is a real issue. And this shows the level of not only the discontent, but the level of action that they're willing to take based on the misinformation and lies that are being spread constantly and everywhere. And so we're taking it very seriously, and it's something that we absolutely have got on our radar screen. Just wanted you all to be aware of it, that it's all not all roses and sunshine, because it's a struggle also, and it's work that continues to need to be done if we're going to ensure that that votes are counted, that voters are not disenfranchised in any way, shape, or form, and that we keep democracy moving forward. So wanted to give you that update. Once again, thank you so much. Secretary Simon, thank you for your remarks. Representative Phillips, always glad to see you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mayor, for that. I will say, I think we've all seen a rise in almost autocracy, really, and a willingness to, as we saw on January 6th, use violent means and see our polarization come to this point. And it's really frustrating and actually disturbing. But what's so important about this discussion today, and some questions that we've received, is, what are the reforms that we can do to push back on that extremism and to take reforms to strengthen our democracy? Because I think we all are feeling it, not only in Bloomington at the local level, but obviously on January 6th. So turning to that, there was a question specifically for you, Representative Phillips, about, are there any efforts about ranked choice voting on the congressional level?
So not meaningful ones. There has been some movement, a bill introduced. It's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. I'm actually making an effort to institute ranked choice voting within our Democratic caucus in the next Congress, which would be the 118th. That was not successful this year, but we are going to make an effort to do so. The more members of Congress that get to know it, understand its efficiencies, I think the more likely we'll get behind it as a caucus. And frankly, I think we're going to see some GOP members start to better understand it for them too, particularly as the GOP conference phrased kind of between the Trumpers and seditionists versus the more moderate center-right Republicans that we used to know so well. They're starting to recognize if they stand a chance to succeed in their primaries in particular, ranked choice voting could make a big difference. So we might be approaching a remarkable opportunity here in the next 2 or 4 years to do so. So it's not imminent, but like anything else, it starts with a seed. We're now watering it, and we will hopefully all be around to harvest it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Representative Phillips, for that perspective and report from Congress. Secretary Simon, it looks like this question is for you. What can we do to both protect the integrity of our election infrastructure from foreign interference, like we saw in 2016, and push back against the false claims about voting machines in our last election?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'll try to be brief. Yeah, just as a reminder, in 2016, Minnesota was one of the 21 states whose election infrastructure was targeted by a foreign government, by the Russian government. Nothing bad happened, nobody got in, the system worked, but we've been on guard ever since. Part of that, and I know Representative Phillips knows this, I've heard him talk about it, is continued support from Congress, frankly, on the resource side. The Department of Homeland Security has been great. They come into our office, for example, regularly, and they try to poke and pry and find the soft spots and find the vulnerabilities. And then they issue reports, which include recommendations. And all of those recommendations have really big price tags. And so far, Congress has been great in the last couple of years, including Representative Phillips especially, of making sure we get that money. But they are one-time bursts and another time burst, and some more regular source of funding, I think that's ongoing and reliable would sure be helpful. In terms of the disinformation, as I said at the outset, for those who heard it, I mean, part of it is just speaking truth when we hear those lies. And look, none of us on this call are naive. We've been around politics. That alone isn't going to make folks who think differently just sort of give up. But it's a necessary but insufficient condition, which is to say, no, this election was fair, accurate, honest, and secure. And to cite the things that so many of us have cited. I mean, that is a minimum what we can do. In terms of the equipment in particular, I just have to tell you, our office certifies equipment, the federal government certifies equipment. No piece of elections equipment in Minnesota can be used at all legally unless it's gone through both a federal and a state certification process. And there is no evidence that even a single vote, not even one, was transferred or stolen or misapplied or anything like that. Those who are saying it are making it up. That's all I can tell you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Simon. It's important for all of us to emphasize the facts about the last election and make sure that everyone understands those facts. We really are getting short on time. I'm gonna ask this last question though. And for those of you who have more questions, feel free to submit them to FairVote Minnesota. I want to add that several of you asked questions about all of the reforms that we've been talking about, and we are going to be sending an email with a link to a document that lists all of the bills and the reforms. So if you look in your email after, we'll probably send it tomorrow, you will have a link to that list of bills. So that could answer a lot of your questions, but feel free to email us if there's anything else that hasn't been answered. But we've had several questions about money in politics and how to undo the damage of the Citizens United decisions. Perhaps Dean, could you speak to this about efforts to end the influence of big money in our elections, like the 28th Amendment that I know has been advocated by our friends at American Promise?
Mm-hmm. Well, sunlight is the best disinfectant. I think in the near term, that's how we begin, at least to better expose and then distribute what's really happening. I should tell you, it is as abhorrent as money in politics is on the outside, funding campaigns and independent expenditure groups. The money game inside of Congress is just as woefully embarrassing and corrupting. My colleagues spend 10,000 hours per week raising money. Checks are handed out on the House floor. All the conversations that we should be having about legislation and friendship building and working together instead revolve around fundraisers and money. And how we address it all comprehensively is not easy because both parties are completely beholden to it. But to your question, HR 1, which I'm hoping and I believe one way or another, we will get to President Biden's desk and sign into law. That said, a constitutional amendment is awfully difficult. I mean, it is 50 years after the ERA was first initiated, and we still haven't done that. So you can imagine how difficult it will be to overturn Citizens United. But we can take steps, and we should take steps. But it starts with exposing the truth, encouraging people to unify around it, holding their elected officials accountable, and taking some baby steps towards that end. That's why the 6-to-1 match in HR 1 is important. At least it empowers smaller dollar donors. I also think it's time that we, voters, start calling on big corporate donors and big PACs to start thinking a little bit more about who they're supporting. I was really pleased that a lot of PACs, corporate PACs, announced that they would not be supporting the 147 or so that voted to essentially undermine the election by not certifying the results from the states on January 6th. I think we're going to see that erode, but there's a lot that can be done without legislation as we work to actually overturn some of these important laws. And that's how I will encourage all of you to proceed and spread the word. And every survey I see puts campaign finance reform really low relative to American voters' priorities. I think it's time that we elevate it. And if we do, you'll see politicians respond accordingly.
Great. Well, thank you, Representative Phillips, with that. Now, before we close, we do have some important links and information to share with you. But first, I do want to thank Congressman Phillips, Secretary Simon, and all of our amazing state legislators for spending time with us on this critical issue for our country and our state. I want to share that I got involved in democracy reform after being a longtime gun violence prevention activist. And I was frustrated when common sense reforms that huge majorities supported have not passed. And what happened in Atlanta happens all too often. And there are many areas like that. We need a government that is inclusive, representative, and responsive to the needs of Minnesotans. It's just clear to me that we need democracy reform now more than ever. But this isn't just up to our wonderful elected leaders. We need all of you to get involved. There's nothing more important than supporting democracy reform bills on both the federal and the state level. Our executive director, Jean Massey, who, as you've heard, she does it all, will be placing links in the chat. She put some information there about contacting your legislator. You can volunteer for FairVote Minnesota, for Clean Elections Minnesota. You can contribute. And I do want to make sure you all know about our event this Tuesday, Black Leaders at the Forefront of Democracy Reform, to discuss how ranked choice voting and other reforms can address racial inequities in our voting system. And last but not least, we are hosting one more democracy town hall next Sunday with Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and Secretary Simon. We so appreciate his time. So please spread the word and our registration link. Thank you all. We know that you have busy lives and we so appreciate you devoting your time to this, and especially all of our elected leaders. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, thank you.
Keep the faith.
Thank you.